In today's Farm Report, summertime brings a whole host of parasite issues for beef producers, especially like liver flukes and others. Emily Wilmes with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office talks about how liver flukes are transmitted and what producers can do to treat the parasite.
In spring and summer, beef producers have a laundry list of parasites to watch out for. Some parasites have obvious symptoms and can be easily treated. Others are more difficult to manage. Liver flukes are caused by the parasite Phacelia hepatica. Fluke eggs are passed in the feces of the animal and they hatch into motile Myristidia. The Myristidia must find a host within 3 hours of hatching. The typical host is a snail. The infected snails will eventually shed cercaria, which are motile and will attach themselves to surfaces, such as blades of grass, where they become the infective metacercaria. These are then re-ingested by the final host, completing the life cycle. Once inside cattle, metacercaria migrate through the gut wall, cross the peritoneum, and penetrate the liver capsule and bile ducts. Symptoms associated with liver flukes include reduced weight gain, reduced milk yields, reduced fertility, anemia, and diarrhea. However, a liver fluke infestation is typically subclinical, so you may not even know you have liver flukes unless you have a postmortem completed or you receive feedback from the packing plant about condemned livers. Therefore, producers should look at postmortem examination or carcass information from the packing plant as an essential diagnostic tool for their veterinarians and themselves. Taking prevention measures now can help avoid losses down the road. Looking at reducing exposure to wet, marshy areas where the larvae thrive best and where you are most likely to have snails. Next, look at deworming programs with your veterinarian. 2 oral dewormers are available that are effective against liver flukes: chlorsolone and albendazole. There is also an injectable dewormer, which is a combination of ivermectin and chlorsolone. All the drugs have advantages and disadvantages in terms of cost, ease of administration, withdrawal times, and effectiveness. Consult your veterinarian to be certain which product will work best for your operation. This is Emily Wilmes with University of Minnesota Extension.
You may remember earlier this year that the U.S. and New Zealand joined forces in a World Trade Organization dispute filed against Indonesia.
Nearly $200 million of U.S. exports were affected by Indonesia's import restrictions last year.
We have a very similar perspective, of course. That's why we are a co-complainant with the United States.
That's U.S. Trade Representative Michael Froman and New Zealand Ambassador Tim Grosser from back in March. The initial request for a WTO dispute settlement panel was made in April on Indonesian import restrictions on agricultural products, such as horticultural commodities and beef. Now, word from Geneva is that a dispute settlement panel has been established to hear the claims, with the WTO soon to appoint panelists from member nations. Indonesia, meanwhile, maintains their measures are fully consistent with its obligations within the World Trade Organization. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Making sure you have the right medication is important when it comes to treating cattle, especially when it comes to mastitis. Emily Wilmes with the University of Minnesota Extension Service Office shares some information on how to make sure you have the right mastitis medication.
Understanding the different components of mastitis tubes and their labeling can help you select the correct treatment for your infected cows. A good first step is culturing the milk of infected cows so you know which pathogens you are treating. As always, you should consult with your veterinarian before administering any medication to your animals. Here are the selection factors you should consider. 1. Antibiotic. The antibiotic is the actual drug that the mastitis tube contains. Some examples of antibiotics are amoxicillin, ampicillin, and penicillin. Knowing the drug in your mastitis tube is helpful, as some herds can become immune or resistant to certain drugs over time. 2. Bactericidal versus bacteriostatic treatment. These two terms refer to what the antibiotic does to the bacteria or pathogen. Bactericidal treatments will kill the bacteria, whereas bacteriostatic treatments will slow the bacteria's growth or reproduction. The majority of mastitis tubes on the market are bactericidal. 3. Spectrum. The spectrum of the tube indicates the range of bacteria an antibiotic will treat. Broad-spectrum tubes will treat a wider range than narrow-spectrum tubes. However, narrow-spectrum mastitis tubes may be more effective against specific pathogens, especially if you know what pathogens you are treating as a result of culturing your milk samples. 4. Dosage. The dosage tells you the size and frequency of the antibiotic that should be administered to the cow. The units of size are expressed as one entire tube. Frequency can vary from 2 tubes in 12 hours to 1 tube every 24 hours for 8 days, and everywhere in between. 5. Milk and slaughter withholding times. The withholding time for milk and slaughter are important to pay attention to. They indicate how long after the last treatment the antibiotic will remain present in the cow's body. Milk or meat found to contain antibiotic residues will be rejected and not used for food products. 6. Product indications. The product indications will give you more information about what the mastitis tube is marketed to do. Typically, it will list some common pathogens it treats, type of mastitis that it best treats, such as subclinical or clinical, and sometimes if it treats strains of bacteria resistant to other types of antibiotics. Summer can be a tough time to manage mastitis, but if you take preventative precautions and treat confirmed cases properly, it doesn't have to be a nightmare. This is Emily Wilmes with University of Minnesota Extension.
The number of cattle placed on feedlots in April was down 5% from that same month 1 year ago, according to USDA's latest Cattle on Feed report. As for the why, USDA livestock analyst Shale Shagam says part of it stems from this question.
How strongly producers are holding back heifers, especially for addition to the breeding herd.
Shagam also notes improved pasture conditions in many states compared to last April.
Producers simply are going to keep some of those animals on grass longer rather than put them in the feedlot.
Despite the smaller year-over-year feedlot placement numbers, total inventory for cattle and calves in feedlots were up 1% from 1 year ago. Marketings of fed cattle, however, were down 8% from 2014. Shagam adds,
This report largely reinforces a lot of the ideas that we've had. We'll obviously have a better idea of what producer additions to the breeding herd are and what producer intentions are when we get semi-annual cattle report, which is scheduled for the 24th of July.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.